Hiding inside Nintendo's most beloved franchise are torture dungeons, reanimated infant skeletons, and enemies so disturbing that the company apparently retired them from the series. That's why today I'm explaining most terrifying things across the entire Zelda franchise, from unsettling to absolutely nightmare-inducing. Starting with something every veteran remembers, Style Children. The first time night fell in Hyrule Field, you learned that this fairy tale had teeth. Your 9-year-old Link, alone in an open field with nowhere to hide. The drawbridge slams shut, the sun drops, and then skeletal figures with glowing red eyes start clawing themselves out of the dirt. Here's the thing, Stall Children only spawn when Link is a child. Nintendo made a deliberate design choice to have undead creatures hunt a 9-year-old boy in an open field at night. Kill one and another rises. Kill 10 and a larger one spawns. Through data mining, players discovered this scaling continues indefinitely. They can grow larger than buildings. But here's where it gets dark. Their Japanese name is literally Sutaru Bebi, which translates to stall baby. The stall prefix marks undead throughout Zelda. These are explicitly reanimated infant skeletons. In Ocarina of Time, their origin is never explained. The dominant theory connects them to the Hyrulean Civil War referenced by the Deku Tree sprout, a fierce conflict before the game's events. The implication? The bones of dead soldiers, or their children, lie just beneath Hyrule's peaceful surface. Their audio hides something even creepier. The stall child laugh is a sped-up version of Phantom Ganon's laugh, connecting these minor enemies to the game's darkest villain. They vanish in the adult timeline, replaced by Pose, raising the question of whether Ganondorf destroyed the undead or simply evolved them into something worse. Nobody talks about stall children anymore, because Zelda did far worse things later. But if you think skeleton babies hunting a child in an open field is disturbing, wait until you see what crawled out of Tears of the Kingdom. Gloom Hands. Tears of the Kingdom proved Zelda's horror tradition never died. It just waited 20 years to traumatize a new generation. Gloom Hands are 5 massive, corpse-like clawed hands composed of pure gloom, each with a malice-dripping eye embedded in its palm. And they turned experienced players into absolute cowards. When they spawn on the surface, the sky turns blood red. A haunting, musical sting of reversed, moaning vocals floods the audio. They ooze toward Link with relentless speed, virtually impossible to outrun on foot, regenerating if even a single hand survives. Their grab attack squeezes Link while dealing gloom damage, a mechanic that permanently reduces maximum hearts until healed by rare means. And if you somehow destroy all 5 hands, they don't just die. A Phantom Ganon materializes from the remains, wielding unique weapons like the Gloom Sword and Demon King's bow. But here's where it gets worse. They have no compendium entry. 0. Link's Sensor Plus cannot detect them. They are ambush predators in a game about open-world exploration, punishing curiosity itself. They can spawn when you paraglide into the wrong area, land on the wrong surface, or enter the wrong cave. One group even corrupts the great Deku Tree, turning a beloved franchise safe haven into a nightmare zone. Fan reactions became their own genre. TikTok and Reddit are filled with genuine panic reactions. One player wrote, "I nearly cried the first time. At one point, I jumped off a mountain to avoid them." A Nintendo Life poll found 71% of respondents chose Gloom Hands as the scariest element in Tears of the Kingdom. TV Tropes describes them as a combination of Wallmasters, Malice, and Dead Hand that sends you straight to the grave. They are spiritual descendants of every grabbing hand enemy in Zelda history, distilled into their purest form. And that lineage matters, because the original creature those hands reference appears later on this list, but at least you can fight Gloom Hands. The next entry strips away that option entirely. The Silent Realm. Skyward Sword Silent Realm Trials do something no other Zelda sequence attempts. They remove every weapon, every tool, every companion from Link's inventory, and drop him, completely defenseless, into a nightmare version of a world he thought he knew. His spirit separates from his body, the screen desaturates into an eerie, washed-out dreamscape, and surrounding him are the Guardians, towering armored figures wielding massive weapons who exist for one purpose only. The rules are merciless. Link must collect 15 sacred tears scattered across the trial area. Each tear pauses the Guardians for 90 seconds. Step into waking water, let the flower-shaped timer lose its last petal, or get spotted by a patrolling watcher, and every Guardian in the realm awakens simultaneously. One hit means instant failure. Link's spirit shatters, all collected. Tears are lost, and the trial restarts from 0. Here's what makes it brutal. The Guardians cannot be fought, cannot be stunned, and cannot be reasoned with. Earth Guardians patrol on foot with crushing weapons. Sky Guardians are worse. Robed, dual-scythe-wielding horrors that fly and pass through walls. Once alerted, a Sky Guardian is effectively inescapable without precise routing. The atmosphere shifts violently between states. Dormant Guardians produce an eerie, suspended calm. Awakened Guardians trigger one of the most panic-inducing chase themes in Nintendo history, all harsh percussion and alarming staccato. But here's where it gets psychological. The Silent Realm weaponizes your own competence against you. In every other Zelda sequence, accumulated skill and equipment make you stronger. Here, none of that matters. A Zelda veteran and a first-time player are equally helpless. Forum posts from Zelda Dungeon capture this perfectly. My first Silent Realm left me with my heart racing. I have extreme anxiety, and the music from being chased really set me off. The trials appeared in both the 2011 original and the 2021 HD remaster, traumatizing players a second time. Den of Geek named the Silent Realm among the franchise's scariest moments, specifically because Link is separated from his body and, by extension, all his usual weapons and items. It is Zelda distilled to pure prey and predator dynamics, with you as the prey. At least the Silent Realm is temporary. You can leave. The next enemy lives in a place you'll remember forever, and what it does to you is worse than death. Redeads. Before Redeads, most Zelda enemies were obstacles. After Redeads, some were predators. These brown, shriveled, humanoid figures with hollow wooden mask faces debuted in Ocarina of Time and immediately established themselves as the franchise's most iconic horror element. They appear on every single Scariest Zelda list ever compiled. Their weapon isn't claws or magic. It's sound. When Link enters a Redead's line of sight, it emits a blood-curdling, high-pitched shriek, an indescribable, almost human scream that literally freezes Link in place. The player mashes buttons uselessly as the Redead shambles forward with agonizing slowness. Upon reaching the paralyzed Link, it latches onto his body, wrapping around him and biting repeatedly, draining health with an animation that multiple journalists have called strangely intimate and assault-like. Joel Coucher of Dread Central wrote that the attack felt like what it would feel like to be a victim in a horror movie. Their most devastating appearance is Hyrule Castletown after the 7-year time skip. The player remembers this place as a bustling, cheerful market filled with friendly NPCs. When adult Link returns, it's a burned-out ruin crawling with Redead standing motionless in the ash. The Super Smash Bros. Melee trophy confirms they're not actually reanimated corpses, but magic animated into hideous humanoid shapes. Clay constructs. They were never alive. They were manufactured to look human enough to trigger every instinct of revulsion. But here's where it gets complicated. The horror deepens in Majora's Mask, where a gossip stone reveals that the Redeads in Ikana were once members of the castle's dancing troupe. If Link wears certain masks, they dance instead of attacking, a haunting echo of their former humanity. Burning a Gibdo's wrappings reveals a Redead underneath, establishing them as the universal substrate of Zelda's undead. In Wind Waker, they were redesigned with detailed rotting faces and gold earrings, initially standing with black dead eyes that shift to glowing red when they spot Link. They hide in coffins that pop open without warning. Multiple fan accounts describe closing their eyes while running through Castletown as children. One Nintendo Life reader wrote, "I would only confront them out of absolute necessity, freezing them with the Sun Song while my eyes were closed." Redeads are not the most visually disturbing Zelda enemy. They are the most experientially disturbing. The scream, the paralysis, the helpless watching as something dead walks towards you and you cannot move. But if Redeads take your ability to move, the next entry takes something far more existential: your identity. Elegy of Emptiness. In the land of Ikana, Majora's Mask's domain of the dead, the undead king Egostu Ikana teaches Link a song after being defeated in combat. His words are chilling in their precision. "I grant to you a soldier who has no heart, one who will not falter in the darkness. This soldier, who has no heart, is your twin image, a shell of yourself that you will shed when your song commands it." The Elegy of Emptiness creates an inanimate statue of Link's current form, used to hold down switches in Stone Tower Temple. The Japanese name is even more disturbing: Nukegara no Erezi, literally, Elegy of Exuvia. An exuvia is the shed skin of an insect after molting. An elegy is a funeral lament. The song's name translates to funeral song for a discarded husk. Playing it produces 4 possible statues, one for each of Link's forms, and each one reveals something the game never explicitly states. The Deku statue resembles not Link's Deku form, but the Deku Butler's son, the twisted, withered tree found at the game's beginning, whose soul was trapped in Link's Deku mask. During the credits, the Deku Butler is shown weeping beside this tree, confirming his son's death. The Goron statue bears the scarred face of Darmani III, the dead Goron hero. The Zora statue captures the lifeless expression of Mikau, the drowned Zora guitarist. Each statue is a memorial to a dead person whose soul Link carries. But here's where it gets unsettling. The Link statue has visible pupils and a fixed, wide smile, an expression art historians call an archaic smile, found on ancient Greek statues meant to signify life. On a rigid, inanimate figure, it produces a profound, uncanny valley effect. The face is subtly wrong. The posture is unnaturally stiff. If 3 of the 4 statues represent dead people, the pattern asks an obvious question about the 4th. This statue became the central visual icon of Ben Drowned, one of the most famous creepypastas ever written, created by Alexander D. Hall in 2010. The story describes a haunted Majora's Mask cartridge where the Elegy statue follows the player through locations locations where it shouldn't exist, staring with those empty smiling eyes. The concept worked because the statue was already terrifying. Halls simply weaponized what Nintendo had built. The story ran as a multi-year alternate reality game. It received coverage from Kotaku and Vice, and permanently fused the elegy statue to internet horror culture. In-game, the effect is more subtle but equally unsettling. One player on Rely on Horror described the moment perfectly. When I was done placing statues and looked back, I saw that 2 of them were staring directly at me, while the third was blocked by a pillar. Stone Tower Temple forces you to create and abandon these effigies of the dead repeatedly, populating Ikana's land of death with hollow memorials that stare back. If the elegy reveals you might be dead, the next location reveals where Hyrule keeps its bodies, the Shadow Temple. Beneath Kakariko Village's graveyard lies a place the royal family forbids anyone to discuss. The Zelda Encyclopedia confirms it explicitly. The Shadow Temple is where the Sheikah have historically taken enemies of the royal family to be interrogated, or worse. The in-game inscription, whispered by skulls embedded in the walls, states it plainly: Shadow Temple. Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. The environmental storytelling is relentless. Spinning guillotine blades line the corridors. Spiked walls close in on rooms like trash compactors. Prison cells with chains and restraints sit behind iron bars. Wooden torture posts bear visible red bloodstains, a detail remarkable enough that it survived into the 3DS remake, despite the game's E10+ rating. Blood is almost never shown in Nintendo games. Here it's on the floors, the walls, the devices. A ferry crosses a foggy abyss, described in-game as the ferry to the other world. Paralleling Karen's boat on the river Styx, it sinks after reaching its destination, implying a one-way trip. The bottom of the well is worse because you enter it as Child Link, approximately 9 years old, with nothing but a Kokiri sword and a slingshot. The well was built beneath the house of a man who could see the truth, the original owner of the Lens of Truth. Community theories suggest this man was a Sheikah operative, a torturer, or possibly the entity that became the Shadow Temple's boss. The well's architecture mirrors the temple above. Sarcophagi, bones, acid pools, and a floor made entirely of human skulls described in analyses as a hollowed-out mass grave. But here's where it gets disturbing. The temple's boss, Bongo Bongo, is a gargantuan, invisible creature whose design tells its own story. It has 2 severed, floating hands and a single massive eye atop a neck stump where a head should be. It appears to be a mutilated humanoid, hands amputated, head removed, skin appearing flayed. The dominant fan theory, supported by in-game dialogue about the man who could see the truth, suggests Bongo Bongo is the reanimated spirit of a prisoner who was executed by dismemberment. The arena is a giant drum it beats with its severed hands, a detail connecting to possible ceremonial drumming at executions. The architecture of Zelda analysis captured the dungeon's essence. The song accompanying the Shadow Temple exemplifies everything contrary to comfort. It seizes the human voice and perverts it, allowing only tortured grunts and abject moans. One literary analysis compares the temple to Ursula K. Le Guin's the ones who walk away from Omelas, a place built to concentrate all evil and suffering so the rest of Hyrule could exist in peace. The kingdom's bright meadows and cheerful towns were purchased with blood, and the Shadow Temple is where the bill was kept. At least the Shadow Temple is where Hyrule hides its atrocities. The next entry reveals what happens when you wear them on your face. Transformation masks. The first time Link puts on the Deku mask in Majora's Mask, the game shows something no player expects from a Nintendo title. Link reaches for his face. The mask attaches, and then he screams. His body contorts, his limbs twist at unnatural angles, and a guttural cry of agony fills the audio as the transformation rips through him. This animation plays every single time a transformation mask is equipped. It never gets less disturbing. The official description states that the mask's boundless sorrow rushes inside the wearer, causing them to scream as the mask takes on an expression of agony. This isn't power-up fanfare, it's a depiction of pain. Specifically, the pain of a dead person's final moments flooding into a child's body. Each of the 3 transformation masks contains a trapped soul. The Goron mask holds the spirit of Darmani III, a legendary Goron hero killed by a boulder while trying to save his people from eternal winter. Link finds Darmani's ghost wailing at his own grave, begging to be brought back to life. The Song of Healing, taught by the Happy Mask salesman, puts his spirit to rest by sealing it inside the mask. When Link wears it, Gorons recognize him as Darmani, those sideburns. Aren't you Darmani? You're supposed to be dead. The Zora mask contains Mikau, guitarist of the Indigo Goes, who Link finds mortally wounded and dying in the ocean after being attacked by Gerudo pirates. Link watches him die, plays the Song of Healing, and buries him on the beach. His gravestone remains visible throughout the entire game, a permanent reminder of what Link now wears on his face. But here's where it gets dark. The Deku mask is the most disturbing because it's never explicitly confirmed, only implied through devastating context. At the game's beginning, Link passes a twisted, withered tree that resembles a Deku scrub. Later, the Deku butler tells Link that his Deku form reminds me of my son. During the end credits, the butler is shown weeping beside the twisted tree, confirming it as his child's remains. The Art and Artifacts book later verified this. The implication, Skull Kid, under Majora's influence, killed the Deku Butler's son and used his soul to curse Link. The Song of Healing is presented as merciful, but fan theorists have noted a darker reading. It doesn't release spirits, it traps them. The Happy Mask salesman explains that the powerful spirit within Majora's mask was sealed in shadow, the same type of magic. Link is not honoring the dead. He is sealing their souls into objects and then wearing their identities to solve puzzles. NPCs interact with him as if their loved ones have returned. He uses the bodies of the dead as tools. Producer Eiji Aonuma confirmed the game's darkness was intentional. The sadness of this world can also raise a hero. Director Yoshiaki Koizumi's personal anxieties, including the 1998 North Korean missile crisis and his interest in cattle mutilation, directly shaped the game's storylines. The one-year development deadline imposed by Miyamoto created a pressure cooker that channeled real exhaustion and dread into every aspect of the design. 3 trapped souls worn by a child through the land of the dead. But if you think wearing dead people's faces is disturbing, the final entry is something Nintendo created once and apparently never had the courage to use again. Dead Hand, you are 9 years old. You have a wooden sword and a slingshot. You have descended into a well beneath a quiet village and found, at its bottom, a room where the floor and walls are made of human skulls. In this room, pale elongated arms sway gently from the ground like stalks of wheat in a field of bone. You approach one, it grabs you by the face, then the floor erupts. Dead Hand, the mini-boss of both the bottom of the well and the Shadow Temple in Ocarina of Time, is consistently ranked as the single most terrifying enemy in Nintendo history, and the evidence for this consensus is overwhelming. It appears on virtually every Scariest Zelda list ever compiled. It has never appeared in any Zelda game since, widely believed to be because Nintendo recognized they had gone too far. The visual design defies the franchise's aesthetic so completely that multiple journalists have compared it to Silent Hill. Dead Hand's main body is a pale, flabby, almost tumorous mass of flesh, frequently described as an enlarged maggot, with 2 tiny vestigial arms ending in sharp red spines instead of hands. Its body is covered in red blotches, widely interpreted as the blood of previous victims. Its head features black, expressionless voids where eyes should be, and an enormously oversized jaw that can unhinge to gaping widths filled with crooked, oversized teeth. Its neck is unnaturally long, craning upward when idle, then bending down to bite with a sound that has been described as a laughing. But here's where it gets traumatic. The attack pattern is what elevates Dead Hand from disturbing to nightmare fuel. The infinite hands, 4 to 6 disembodied pale arms protruding from the skull floor, grab Link and hold him immobile. Only then does Dead Hand's main body erupt from beneath the bones, groaning, shuffling toward the restrained player with its neck extended and jaw widening. The intended strategy requires players to deliberately get grabbed, then mash buttons to break free and strike the creature's face before it can bite. You must offer yourself as bait to a monster in a mass grave. The hands respawn infinitely. If Dead Hand submerges before you can hit it, the process repeats. No official explanation for Dead Hand exists. Navi's hint text says only, Dead Hand, if it grabs you, tap any button to escape. Nintendo has never commented on its design, its origins, or its purpose. This silence has fueled decades of theorizing. The most widely accepted theory holds that Dead Hand is the reanimated amalgamation of torture victims, its grotesque form representing centuries of suffering inflicted in the Shadow Temple complex. The elongated neck suggests stretching or hanging torture. The lack of functional hands mirrors amputation. The Room of Skulls is a mass grave that, as Zelda Dungeon's analysis notes, is only growing in occupants. A darker theory proposes Dead Hand was deliberately fed prisoners as a disposal method, a living oubliette maintained by the Sheikah beneath a quiet village. The bottom of the well encounter is the worst of the two because of the protagonist's age. Nintendo forces Child Link, with minimal equipment, minimal health, and minimal combat ability, into what is functionally a torture dungeon to fight an abomination that grabs children by the face and bites them in a room made of skulls. The dissonance between Zelda's family-friendly reputation and this encounter is the source of its power. DualShockers called it not only the creepiest in the series, but also one of Nintendo's most intense, scariest, and captivating experiences. Screen Rant wrote that Dead Hand feels like it was pulled directly from the world of a horror game. Players who encountered it as children report nightmares lasting weeks. Dead Hand is the logical endpoint of everything on this list. The Stall children hint that Hyrule's soil hides dark things. Gloom Hands prove the franchise never stopped hiding them. The Silent Realm removes your ability to fight back. Redeads take your ability to move. The Elegy reveals that you might already be dead. The Shadow Temple reveals that Hyrule was built on suffering. The Transformation Masks reveal that you're wearing the dead. And Dead Hand, waiting in its room of bones at the bottom of a well in a quiet village, reveals what happens when all of those things converge into a single, pale, grinning nightmare that Nintendo put in a game for children and never explained. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.